Hello, dear viewers. This is Desiree Rover from the Netherlands. And I have a guest for you. Do I have a guest for you tonight? But first, a saying by Leonardo da Vinci. There are three kinds of people: those who see when shown, and those who don't see. And we are here for the people who see when shown. And that is what this program is going to be all about. It is Sunday, April 12, 2015. This is the Minority of One report. And I'm speaking with Patrick Wood, economist, financial analyst, and author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse to Global Transformation. And he has several websites, technocracyrising.com, augustforecast.com, and localactivist.org. And what we are going to talk about is something that many of us have felt, but couldn't put our finger on. And so Patrick is going to help us to connect the dots so we understand where it's coming from, that the court system is talking another language than we are, so we lose cases and we have no clue why governments are acting crazy like they do, and why healthcare systems are not curing and helping patients, but the other way around. So, Patrick Wood, very welcome.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here, and also just I'm from Arizona, actually, in the United States, and I'm very pleased to explain some of my material to an international audience. That's very, very, very pleasant for me to do.
Yes, I recognize your verve and your I don't know the exact words in English, but your enthusiasm to help people understand what you have found in your research. And as far as I'm concerned, what I find in my research makes my heart ache most of the time. And you must absolutely recognize that as well.
I do, yeah. Globalization is a global problem.
Yep.
That's self-evident. But I studied globalization for almost 40 years. And the impact that it's had on the world at large. The United States has been a driver, let's say certain people in the United States have been a driver of the globalization process for the last 40 years. But it is a global problem. And in many ways, other countries in the world are much worse off for it than we are. Although it's coming around to bite us now really hard. But many countries in the world, Europe, for instance, is far more advanced in the globalization process than is rank and file America. And other countries are pretty much in the same boat. You look at Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, even down to Australia. There's a big impact of globalization on those countries. And so it is a global problem, and we're all in this together, if you will. we all have the same issues that we're looking at, and it's a good thing when people of different countries put their heads together and say, we have a common interest here.
Yes.
to be talking about and exposing these people for what they are. So yes. That hopefully that's what I'll be able to help you with today.
Yeah. My first question is, Patrick, how did you find out about all that you wrote your book about, the Trojan horse we are facing?
My first set of books, was back in 1979 and 1980. They were called Trilaterals over Washington. And I did there was 2 volumes of that book, and it was, I was the co-author with Anthony Sutton, who was a Brit actually, but he moved to the United States for his academic career. He was a professor at UCLA for a period of years teaching economics, and then he went to work for the Hoover Institution for War, Peace, and Revolution at Stanford University. And he produced several amazing scholarly works on the transfer of technology from the West to the East. That is, the Eastern countries like, the Soviet Union and so on. And I met Tony Sutton after he had been evicted, if you will, from the Hoover Institution, because the president of Stanford University at the time was David Packard. And David Packard, that was the founder, by the way, the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, the giant technology company, computer company. And David Packard was the president of Stanford at the time in Palo Alto. And he was he's one of the initial members of the Trilateral Commission. So when Tony began to write about some of these people, he got on the trail of some of the stuff that was going on. They found out quickly that they better shut him off before he discovered too much more. So they did. They asked him to leave, and well, they didn't ask him to leave. They basically froze him out. But I ran into Tony shortly thereafter at a gold conference down in New Orleans. I was in the stock industry, financial industry, but I had an interest in gold at the time. And I met Tony by chance at a breakfast meeting. And we started talking, comparing notes, and he was easy to listen to. He had a British accent that was fascinating to me at the time. And we realized that we were both studying the same group of people from a slightly different angle, but basically the same group. And we realized the story was so big that we committed by handshake to collaborate on writing a newsletter on the Trilateral Commission to start putting out some of our findings. And so we started a newsletter called the Trilateral Observer. And the various monthly issues that we did for this newsletter were the basis for producing the two books that we ultimately produced called Trilaterals Over Washington. Tony was and very much my mentor of those days. I was younger than he. He passed, by the way, in 2002. But Tony was a world-class researcher. He was very good at what he did, and he was very scholarly in his approach. The people at the Hoover Institution, jokingly called him the Hoover vacuum cleaner. I don't know if you have Hoover vacuum cleaners over there, but because he had such a passion for detail, he sucked up everything in sight. It was the idea. And so they jokingly called him the Hoover vacuum cleaner. But he was a world-class researcher, and he was an expert at doing original research on the material that he wrote about. And so Tony and I teamed up to write about globalization. That's really where I got my major start at it. I was already on the trail, but I didn't know what I had. I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And so this is where I got my grounding in, matters of globalization. And so I've continued that over the years. My original education was in economics. I never taught economics. I never was associated with school or anything like that. But I've had an interest in economics because it impacts the financial world. That was my original job when I got out of college, was working in the financial industry. And so after we wrote our two books, we did a number of publicity tour type things with radio and TV and speaking in person. And we did impact a lot of people back then. Most of the information that anybody will hear about the Trilateral Commission today has its roots in the research we did back in the late 1970s. It wasn't a very popular topic at the time. Let me put it that way. We were kind of on the razor's edge talking about this stuff, but Tony knew how to get a hold of the information, and there was nothing hidden. There never was any. This is not a conspiracy in the sense that somebody completely hid the bodies, if you will. It just didn't happen that way. These people wrote papers the academic types. They published papers in fancy journals, academic journals and stuff. But a man on the street would never see those journals because the average people don't have access to those normally. But Tony, he was at home with that, so he knew where to go to find out what these people were saying to each other, at least. And that was the basis of our research back then. So we studied the Trilateral Commission, and their goal was to start a new international economic order. They said that plainly all over their literature. We didn't understand quite what that meant then. We knew it was going to be bad for us, the people of the world, but in any case, we did the best we could at the time with the information we had. And then I studied, as I was continuing some of my research after Tony had passed, I ran across the subject of historic technocracy. I'd never heard of it before. I thought I knew something about American history. Turns out I didn't know half as much as I thought. It was kind of embarrassing almost, to think you know something about the history of your country, and then here's some major political movement that happened in the 1930s, and I'd never even heard the word before.
No, but isn't it true that history books don't mention things sometimes or give a lopsided view of reality?
Yes.
If you compare history books from country to country, you will see totally different stories about the same event.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
So I started studying historic technocracy, and it struck me immediately that many of the things that we have going on today in the world, things like sustainable development, the green economy, Agenda 21, things like that, were really an expression of historic technocracy. It was unmistakable to me to see the patterns, to see the ideas. But one day it occurred to me that the original book that Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote, he was a co-founder of the Trilateral Commission, by the way, in 1973. Brzezinski wrote a book in 1970 called Between Two Ages. And the subtitle was the telling part. I had kind of forgotten the subtitle in a way. It just didn't impact me too much. But the subtitle was America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Technotronic Era. And from what I remembered studying Brzezinski's book years ago, it seemed to me that some of the things he was talking about were very similar to historic technocracy. So I went back and I read his book again, comparing the themes and the themes of his book with the themes of historic technocracy. And lo and behold, I found a connect. And I also found, remembered at the time that Brzezinski was a professor at Columbia University in New York. It's a very prestigious kind of leftist type, university over the years. There's been lots of bad things happen from, fallout from Columbia, but he was with Columbia. And the original technocracy movement also got its start at Columbia University with prominent engineers and scientists. And so there was another connection that Columbia University had the original doctrines, if you will, of technocracy. And here Brzezinski shows up writing essentially some of the same ideas 30 years later. Well, that was the book in any case. I already knew this. That book was what endeared him to David Rockefeller. And he and David Rockefeller together founded the Trilateral Commission in 1973. Brzezinski was the brains, and Rockefeller was the money. You could call it the Beauty and the Beast. You could call it the Prince and the Brawn.
Yeah.
But
like in medicine, it's the same thing. Rockefeller is the money behind what happens in Western patent medicine.
Yes, right. So his money and Brzezinski's brains together, they formed the Trilateral Commission in 73, and they drew their membership from Europe, from Japan, and from the United States. Well, actually North America, but most of them were from the US. And they brought in members. Some were academics, some were press representatives, some were politicians, some were, in fact, most of them were industrialists slash multinational corporation types, CEOs, board of director type people working in multinational corporations. And their specific goal was to create a new international economic order. They said that every opportunity they had. It was on every paper they ever wrote. At the top of it, it was their tagline, fostering a new international economic order. They never specifically said what that was. But when I discovered technocracy several years ago, it all of a sudden clicked with me that the system that they were implementing was historic technocracy. And the interesting thing is, back in the 1930s, technocracy had no institutional money behind it at all. There was no Rockefellers, there was no Carnegies, there was no Ford Foundation, there was no Mellons, there was nobody there that gave them any money. They basically were poor as church mice. And they had the intellectual backing of Columbia University for a very short period of time, but Columbia kicked them out pretty quickly. After about almost a year, they got booted. And then they had to start their own little organization, which is a membership organization. Ultimately had 500,000 members, by the way, in America. But they started this organization and they existed on just membership fees. That's all they had. So the reason I point this out is that the connection to the big money in the global circles did not come until Brzezinski and Rockefeller got together in 1973. Yeah. Which brings up another interesting point, and that just something I always like to mention. These people amongst the global elite, like the members of the Trilateral Commission, they're not very original people at all. They profess to be experts and the PhDs, and they know everything, and we should just do what they say. But my experience has been they're not particularly bright, and most of the ideas, if not all of the ideas that they hijack from somebody else. In other words, I don't want to use the word steal, that's not the right word, but maybe hijack would just work fine. The whole concept of historic technocracy was not original whatsoever with these people. They like to make you think that it is, but it isn't. They took it almost completely from historic technocracy that was very carefully written down and recorded in the 1930s. So on the other hand, they started out in 73 to lay plans to implement technocracy in the world today. And when I started looking at it from this, after realizing that Brzezinski had a lot to do with this, again, I went through all of my research on the Trilateral Commission, kind of fast forwarded from 1973 forward just to see what they had done to implement the systems that we see in place today. Things like Agenda 21 and sustainable development and smart growth and green economy issues that's all over the UN right now. And our education system over here is a big mess right now with the so-called Common Core education standards that have been foisted upon us. Yeah, so I looked at all these things and I thought, lo and behold, I find members of the Trilateral Commission every step of the way. So much so that it's undeniable that this was the system that they had in mind from day one, was to bring in this so-called technotronic era, which really is technocracy. I prefer to call it technocracy instead of bowing to Brzezinski's use of the term technotronic. That cheapens it. It was technocracy. It really was.
Yeah, call it spade a spade. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the historic side of technocracy in just a minute. But the big takeaway on technocracy is to realize that it's not a replacement political system in any way. It was designed to be a replacement economic system. And this is something that most researchers today don't grasp. Most activists don't grasp this today. Activists in America are fighting political battles. They're fighting, against, or I should say, fighting for legislative issues. They're fighting for Congress. They're fighting for the Senate. They're fighting against the executive branch. All political. They don't see that it's not a political issue. It never has been. It's been an economic issue. And if there has been a coup in the world today, I think there has, it has not been a political coup. It has been an economic coup. And the world has been transformed economically. Everywhere you go, you see the transformation taking place. It's been very profound in Europe, I believe, even more so than here. Your press, interesting enough, is a little bit more open than American press is in discussing it, talking about it. So in America, American press is still very closed-lipped about this. They don't want to talk about it. So we have to talk about it. at least enough to us, I guess.
But once you said that Hearst forbade to talk about technocracy, so maybe that's still lingering on?
That's an interesting little side note of history. Yeah. Randolph Hearst was the big power in publishing, news publishing in the, at least from the 30s through the 50s. And he was a character, no doubt. He was a very eccentric person. But when Columbia University severed with the technocracy movement, it was because one of the co-conspirators, if you will, of technocracy at the time, the figurehead of technocracy, was a guy by the name of Howard Scott. And Howard Scott had put himself off as being some really intelligent engineer, got his education somewhere, he said, in Europe, and then came to the United States, and he worked here in the U.S., and then he got involved with technocracy. Well, he turned out to be a promoter, kind of a con man. And he wasn't what he said. In fact, somebody started doing research on him, and they found out he didn't even have a degree in engineering. And so Columbia University got pretty upset at that point that, because they're a very prestigious, PhD-oriented school, and here's this guy getting all these press headlines about technocracy, and he's a fraud. He's just a fraud. So he got drop-kicked out of Columbia. The whole movement got drop-kicked out. And as that happened, Randolph Hearst was put in a spot because his newspapers had run all kinds of stories interviewing Howard Scott. And so it occurred to him that this man, Scott, had used the newspaper for his own purposes, and he just lied to him. He was a fraud. And newspaper people don't like to be manipulated, for the sake of news. They don't like to be suckered into a news story. So Randolph Hearst basically had a fit one day, and he said, if anybody, and he sent out a memo, I've got a copy of the memo, he sent out a memo to all of his newspapers around the country and said, if anyone ever mentions the word technocracy again, you are fired. That was that.
Yeah.
Nobody wrote another story on technocracy from that day forward.
Yes. And that, as you said, has a very deep impact on history.
It does. And the way history is constructed, historians go back and kind of sift through the rubble to see what happened. And newspapers are a very important part of history. That's where you find out what people were talking about, what they were thinking about, what kinds of things were being reported and so on. And any historian today who didn't understand, who had no idea in the first place of historic technocracy, they might have had a happy time reading through the newspapers up until that memo. But all of a sudden, if there was no mention of technocracy after that, any objective historian would just conclude, you know, oh well, I guess that didn't pan out. And it would just be a footnote to history. It's about all you could pull out of it. And that's all we have. Nobody knew about it. So, but I found out the goods. I'll thank Sutton for helping me with this, and one of my Canadian colleagues as well. But technocracy was big in Canada as well as in the United States. And before the leaders of technocracy died in the 1990s, they were very old at that point, they all got together and they pooled all of their original documents they had from technocracy from day one, from the 1930s. All of the booklets, all of the personal letters that went back and forth to people, the pictures, the manuals and stuff they had, and they donated the entire batch to the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. And we discovered this archive.
Yeah.
And so I traveled up there from the United States. I took a trip, and they were nice enough to give me access to the entire archive. They brought it out into a little library room, cart after cart after cart full of library boxes. It took me a week to go through all the material.
Yeah.
But what a find. Oh my gosh, it was like finding a major gold mine.
Yeah.
So we got the goods. In any case, I dug up the history, and I got the goods on it and found out exactly what it was all about. But it was a replacement economic system. And in the heat of the Great Depression, I think Europe had the same feeling at the time. There was a lot of despair. People were out of work. They were hungry. There was political confusion because of the aftermath of World War I. And a lot of people in America believed that capitalism was dead. They thought it died. And back in those periods, you got to remember, people were still there talking about communism, because 1918, the Bolshevik Revolution, was still fresh in the mind of many people in the United States. They were talking about Marxism a lot. They were talking, and Karl Marx, they were talking about Darwin and the theories of evolution and stuff. There was a lot of intellectual confusion at that point, and many people in America felt that capitalism was dead. And what will we do? You know, if capitalism dies, will we go back to being savages out in the prairie, or what will happen to us? And so when the engineers and scientists took the lead and said, we will save you, we have created a new economic system that will do away with price-based economics, which is the source of your trouble, money, supply and demand, those sorts of things, are way out of balance and everything. That's why everything's upside down. We will create an engineered society that will solve all of your problems. And we're going to use energy as the currency to regulate this economy. And so instead of money, you will have energy credits. And the energy credits will allow you to buy and sell goods based on how much energy it took to make those goods and services. And we'll do the pricing on that. They basically said it's not supply and demand. It's if you have a sweater on, like you have I don't know if that's a scarf I see, but you have a scarf that you could trace how much that cost in terms of energy if you thought about it long enough. There had to be a farmer somewhere to maybe grow the cotton or the animals if it was wool, You had somebody had to run a tractor, somebody had to run a loom, somebody had to deliver it to the store. There was lights on in the store when people walked in to buy it. You see, there's energies consumed all the way along the way. And if it were possible to figure out exactly how much energy it took to make that scarf, then that's what it would cost you when you walked in with your energy script to buy the scarf. You see, this was a utopian dream. It was a utopian system in every way. Never been tested, never been tried, had no reason. These people were not economists, by the way. There was no expectation that they would know how this would pan out in the end. But I'll tell you, one astute author of that era saw technocracy and understood what it meant, and that was Aldous Huxley. And Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, the book. The science fiction book that modeled a scientific dictatorship. Aldous Huxley. If people haven't read that book, it's available online. It's still widely available because it's considered a classic. I suggest people get it because that was his view of where technocracy would take you, to a scientific dictatorship where everything is micromanaged.
Yes, and he said in '62 that it was not science fiction, that it was reality.
That's right. You're exactly right. So, but Brave New World was written in 1932.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was the year, that was the specific year that technocracy was housed at Columbia University. In the basement of Columbia University, there was only one building at the time. It was called Hamilton Hall. And they had given them one side of the basement, the lower level, to house all their facilities and stuff. So Aldous Huxley certainly had an awareness of technocracy, what it was in terms of in academic terms, and he wrote it would result in scientific dictatorship in the end. And this is exactly where we see the world moving today, I might add.
And wasn't he involved also with the Russell family? Like Bertrand Russell wrote his book in '52,
yes.
Impact of Science on Society.
Yes. There was a lot of people thinking along these terms back then, in those days. It's almost like there was competition amongst academic circles to see who could be the most radical.
Yeah.
Well, everybody else was having revolution, or something was going on, some big thing. There was Russia. A lot of people in America still sided with the communists in Russia early on in the Bolshevik Revolution. People in the United States, a lot of people in the United States, actually helped foster the Bolshevik Revolution, and so they were still pro-Bolshevik, if you will. So, in academic circles where people talk about these kinds of things, that wouldn't have included me for sure, probably not you either, but everybody was vying for some kind of new idea. We got the solution, we solved this problem, listen to this, and maybe they bring up something from Karl Marx, or maybe they bring up something from some other philosopher, and they debate it to death. And things were going on in England at that time too. Huxley was from England, and his brother Julian Huxley was prominent, really kind of leading the charge of the humanist movement in England. So everybody kind of had their own thing that they wanted, their own intellectual
niche.
Their niche, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time. It's not like today, but it was a crazy time back then. And so technocracy, in any case, got its start, and it was wildly popular with Americans. And there were at least 500,000 card-carrying technocrats in America. Many, many more were following the movement, even if they didn't join. And it got big in Canada as well, as I said, up in British Columbia and on, all the way through Manitoba. It was very popular up there as well. It kind of died out after a few years after World War II started, especially, and our economy started picking up again because the war kind of resuscitated the economy to a certain extent. And so it kind of fell out of favor after a while. But the whole movement was documented. We'll talk about this in a minute. The whole movement was documented. The economic system, I should say, was documented to the T, so that we can look back at that today and see exactly what they proposed. But it was an energy-based economy. It was to completely do away with politicians. It was because they believed politicians were idiots. We kind of have that thought today too, but that doesn't mean I agree with technocracy either.
No, that's a different matter, yeah.
But they believed that the politicians were making decisions and policies about technology that they didn't know anything about. And therefore, how could they ever come up with anything intelligent? You know, they're just misusing and mishandling technology. So they had no use for politicians whatsoever. And they would have just done away with our Congress altogether and just said, you just need to let us run everything and forget your politicians. And fortunately, we didn't quite go that way. Instead, we got the Roosevelt presidency with a New Deal, and God help us all, we're still suffering from that. But at least it wasn't blatant technocracy that took over. Another essence of this, too, to a basic part of this, when we talk about dictatorship, and a lot of people are sensing the collar around their necks these days, that things are getting tighter and tighter. A dictatorship, in a historic sense, has been a person. Rome had a dictator. Greece had, every country, it seems like at one time or another, has had a dictator. Somebody who could say, if they didn't like you, off with their head. It's like, I'll do whatever I want, and I'll put whatever rules in place I want. And we look back at dictators and we think, oh my gosh, we don't want a dictator like that. Well, when you talk about scientific dictatorship, nobody's talking about a person. We're not talking about some particular leader. We're not talking about, like in America, people, oh, what if President Obama declares himself to be dictator? Well, that would be a person. And scientific dictatorship is not a person. It's a system. It's the system of things that's the dictator. And that's exactly what Huxley wrote in Brave New World. You couldn't find the people who were pushing the buttons. All you could come in contact with was the system itself. And if the system didn't let you move to the left or to the right, or if the system wouldn't let you buy a certain kind of food, or if the system wouldn't let you get a travel pass to go somewhere to visit your family, you simply didn't get anything. You say, but that's not fair. I'm going to call somebody. I'm going to pick up the phone. There's got to be a mistake. Who do you call? There's nobody to call. You can't call a computer. It's just the system gets a hold of you.
Yeah, and it's totally faceless. Yes, and it is.
It's faceless. It's a faceless dictatorship where the policies are put in effect from the top down, like a computer program.
Yeah, not by elected people either.
Not by elected people whatsoever. But the actual faces of the programmers, if you will, the policymakers. You don't see the actual faces of those people. All you see is the system that controls you.
Yeah.
That's a scientific dictatorship.
Yeah.
So, this is what people are struggling with in the world today, is the feeling that they're getting encroached on. They feel the collar tightening around their neck. They can't quite get a handle on it. Well, maybe they think, well, that's just a passing thing, or maybe it's an anomaly and just, doesn't happen all the time, but it happened to me. And maybe they think things will get better. But over the last 30 years, it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse over time. So we see all of these systems of control, automated systems of control, being put in place today in the world. We see smart grid, for instance, with these digital power meters that are going in everywhere in the world. And it's designed to control the amount of energy that's used by that facility. It'll be able to control the appliances from within and to limit how much electricity you can get in bulk and also how much you'll pay for it. And if you go over your limit, you will automatically be paying a surcharge. And if you go over that limit, you're going to get hammered. And you may have to take out a second mortgage on your house or something to pay for it. But this is what's happening with smart grid. It's what's happening with things like, we probably shouldn't talk too much about weather engineering, geoengineering, but, the whole planetary climate thing today is absolutely over the top insane, but nobody really knows who's behind it. Can we get names and pictures and it's like we see it happening.
No, it's even so that today I was in contact with somebody in Belgium, and he sent me a flight radar picture of a plane that went really like that on the map.
Yeah.
But it is an unidentified plane. You don't know. It doesn't exist. Yes. And chemtrails, so to speak, is one of the subjects that I give presentations on. Yeah. So I know quite a lot of it, and it's a faceless thing. Yes,
it is absolutely faceless. And so the financial world is pretty much in the same boat these days with your credit score and your debit card, and people are talking about going to a cashless society soon. In America, there's already kind of a de facto capital control on cash, because if you walk into a bank with anywhere over a couple of $1,000s, the bankers start asking questions. Where'd you get that money? Well, it's none of your business where I got the money. It's my money. Maybe I've had it under my mattress for the last 10 years. I want to put the money in my bank account. Well, you can't do that until you tell us where you got that money.
But even if you want to take out money, you're limited as to how much you can take out.
That's right. You can't just go to a bank in America anymore and say, well, maybe you've got $10,000 in there and you want the whole thing in cash. They won't have the cash on hand to give it to you. To say, well, it'll take us a week to get that kind of money here. And even then, what do you want it for? It's like, well, It's not your business what I want it for. You're not my mother and you're not my maid. You got nothing to do with this. Just give me my money. But it's getting, that's a control. See, that's just another regulation that has snuck up on us, where we can't move our money the way we used to move our money.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, I would have no problem walking into a bank and taking my entire bank account out at either a cashier's check or in cash. But today, that's verboten. Can't do it.
No.
So there's controls like this in all different areas in society. And then we see this whole sustainable development movement, where you have the ecological aspect. A farmer can't plow that corner of his field anymore because somebody observed a three-toed snail darter or something, and it would disturb its habitat if he were to plow that field. Maybe he's been plowing that field for the last 150 years, but now we know better now. See, so
not now, not anymore.
You can't do that anymore. And if he goes and does it anyway, he winds up in court and getting all kinds of fines and getting sued, and people just trying to take his land away from him altogether. These are regulations. These are controls that are completely out of the hands of the people that are subject to them. This is the essence of scientific dictatorship. I probably just ought to say, too, that the one day where scientists met sociology being the study of society, when scientists met sociology, it was a very, very dark day. It was a bad day. That was the original meeting that kind of gave them the idea, gee, society looks just like an engineering project.
Exactly.
We can do this, They thought, wow, what if we applied our scientific method routines to society? Why, we could do all kinds of, we could really get things straightened out. We could get society to run smoothly, and, where everybody could be happy. And I think of George Orwell's book, 1984, where everybody was given a drug called Soma. They had to take their daily dose of Soma, which is now the name of a drug, by the way, too, a tranquilizing drug that's widely given to people for depression and stuff and muscle issues. But, you know, everybody's going to be happy. We'll just give you some Soma, and you won't complain to anybody anymore.
Yeah.
Life is happy. Life is good. And so the technocrats of the day stepped way overboard to think that they were somehow God's gift to mankind.
Yes.
And that they could, you know, that they could do better
than nature.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to go back up to a quote here I got from a French philosopher, Henri de Saint-Simon, from 1760 to 1825. He's the father of technocracy, by the way, the undisputed father of technocracy. And his writings are available all over the internet. They're easy to get a hold of for people. But he wrote this. This is a quote from one of his essays. "A scientist, my dear friends, is a man who foresees. It is because science provides the means to predict that it is useful. And the scientists are superior to all other men." See, this is the mindset that started technocracy, and we see the outcome of this prediction, if you will, today, because this is still the attitude that these people have today, that they're superior to all of their men. And the other interesting thing is, and I talk frequently on just the topic of scientism as well. Scientism is very much a religion, in the same sense that Christianity is a religion, or Buddhism is a religion, or you name it, Hinduism, okay? Scientism is a religion.
Yes.
One of the reasons that the clear early indicators of this is that Saint-Simon decided that science had the ability to predict the future. That's what he said, has the ability to predict. Now, honestly, I don't know of anybody anywhere ever, maybe outside of the Bible, of course, where the future has been predicted. It's not given to man to know the future. Now, some people take a stab at it. I realize that. Some people make predictions and stuff, but if you actually track their accuracy, it's not very good. And if scientists were to think, well, you know, you may have a crystal ball, but we have our PhD, you know, whatever, that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt what the future is going to bring. You see? Now, and let me fast forward and just make this relevant for today. You have people like, or we have people. He's our citizen, actually. Al Gore, the former vice presidential, or was a vice president with Bill Clinton. Al Gore is the poster child for global warming or for climate change, right? He's one of the big instigators for cap and trade policies, which is the trading of carbon credits, carbon units, which is one step away from a energy-based currency. And Al Gore has this belief that that climate change is a sealed fact, done deal, absolute certainty that it's real, as if he took a picture of it. And he said just the other day that for anybody who does not believe like him, they're a denier. They call those other people deniers. And I'm a denier then, I guess. but because I don't just deny it, I absolutely refute it. So he says, if you don't agree with me, you deserve to be punished. You deserve to be punished. Now, this is acting like a religion.
And a dictator.
You see, well, there's the attitude that scientists are better than all other men.
Yeah.
But these people don't have the ability to predict the future. But they're telling us, Al Gore tells us, the ice is going to melt and the sea's going to rise, and all the people on all the seacoasts are going to drown, and you know, we're all going to die. And he's predicting the future. Well, they have no ability to predict the future. You may extrapolate a trend, but you cannot predict the future to say this is what's going to happen.
And didn't he buy some property near the sea somewhere?
Oh,
yeah, so.
Listen, I want to tell you, by looking at the actions of these people themselves, my personal conclusion is that they know it's a complete scam. I think they know it's a complete scam. Like a con man is pulling, is tricking somebody into doing something for some, for whatever, to cheat them, to manipulate them.
Yeah.
So here you have then somebody like the head of the United Nations Environmental, let's see, what is she actually? She's executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That means she's numero uno. She's the big cheese. Her name is Christiana Figueres. She's a Costa Rican diplomat originally, speaks very good English. I might add several other languages, I believe, too. But she's the head of climate change policy at the United Nations. Now, this woman is in the midst of it, okay? She's like the Al Gore of the United Nations. She was recorded in a press conference on February 3rd, 2015. That's not very long ago. She said this, and I quote, "This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves about the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution," close quote. She is stating flatly that capitalism is going to be replaced with another economic system. This is technocracy. This is the green economy, which has never been tried. There's no precedent for it anywhere in the world, but they're just doing it anyway.
Yeah. Without taking us into account as citizens.
No.
We play no part in this religion.
Not at all. They're just saying this is good for you, so why wouldn't you want to do it?
Yeah.
Just trust us. Just go along with us and you'll see it's all going to be good. Well, that's what they said back with the Bolshevik Revolution. That's what Hitler said in Germany. Just trust us. It's going to be good. It didn't turn out too good. But nevertheless, these people are in process of transforming the global economy today into a technocracy, into their green economy. And I'll suggest at this point, the reason that there is economic angst in the world today, all the way down to people on the street, they sense the economy doesn't make sense anymore. The government tells us the economy is doing great, and yet people down where they have to work, they're doing terrible. Wages have fallen. Age discrimination has kicked a whole rash of people out of the 40 to 50 to 60 age group, pushed them back to being burger flippers or something, in a fast food restaurant. And there's two economies in the world today. It's like there's two things going on. The government talks about the reality of how wonderful everything is, and the people on the street feel like they have a 100-pound weight on their back. This has never been the case historically. I go back 30, 40, 50 years, it was never this way during an economic recovery. Today it is. And I see it in writing, I see it in conversation with people all around the world. Everybody is sensing the global economy does not make sense anymore. Things don't operate to the laws of physics, if you will, the laws of economics that we grew up with, that made sense to us. Doesn't make sense. The reason that this is so is because there are two different economic systems vying for supremacy in the global market today. Two different economic systems that are mortal enemies: capitalism and technocracy. They cannot exist in the same space. They can't. One's going to die, one is going to survive. The only question is, which will it be?
Yeah.
If the United Nations is successful with their push to implement technocracy everywhere in the world via Agenda 21 and sustainable development, all the other things that go with it, then technocracy will win and capitalism will die. And all the progress we've made since the Dark Ages will be going up in smoke, essentially. And we can say hello to George Orwell or Aldous Huxley.
Yeah.
And we can all pull out our little Soma bottles because we're going to need them.
Yeah, because you don't want to partake in a society where, well, we basically back in the 1800s or so, or 1700s.
Right. In our country right now, our president is about to issue an executive order that will, which is not our legislature, he's just going to say it so, to reduce carbon emissions by a certain percentage by a certain date. Which indeed, if this were implemented, if we actually were to take the carbon out of our society and all the, how deeply embedded it is, it would literally push us back into the 1800s as far as lifestyle is concerned. Now, we still may have cars, but they're going to sit in our driveway. We won't be driving them very much. We may have heaters on our houses, but we won't be using them the same way as we did. We'll be pushed back to, somewhere in the 1800s as far as lifestyle is concerned. And the age of people will go down and, backwards again. Longevity and health services and all those kinds of things will just go backwards.
Yes, and we are prisoners of the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Prisoners of the system. So that, anyway, we've kind of gone around the horn here to get a history of technocracy, I guess. But these people are deadly serious about what they're doing today. I can assure you of that. The United Nations, if you read the radical agenda that the United Nations has, it's just amazing. It's absolutely incredible. And people in America still, because the propaganda machine here has spun so well, people in America say that this is a myth.
Yeah.
They say it's a myth.
No.
And yet, this doesn't look like a myth to me. This looks like a book.
Yep.
And it has the United Nations symbol at the bottom of it and UNEP at the bottom of it. Doesn't look like a myth at all. And so I joke, I carry this book everywhere I go, by the way, because when people bring that up, I say, if this is a myth, then you won't mind if I hit you with this, will you?
Yeah.
Because it's a myth, right?
Yeah.
You just want to let them have it. And if that book's not enough, let's try this book.
Oh, that's a better hitter.
Oh, this is a much better book.
Oh, gosh.
This is the Global Biodiversity Assessment book.
Oh, wow.
You can buy this from the United Nations. It's but this is the actual. This is the marching orders for this book. This was the follow-on book. Now this is how we interpret Agenda 21 for the world, and it's only 1,140 pages. And it weighs about 6 pounds. Now, if you hit them with the first book and they don't, get it, you say, well, here's another myth.
Yeah.
I got another myth. You'll like this one even better. Kapow. And, this isn't all. Oh my gosh. There's one more. I like this one too. See if I can find this one here. Same organization, same connection to Agenda 21.
Oh gosh.
Read this one.
Scary.
So everybody can see it.
Whoa.
It's the cultural and spiritual values of biodiversity.
Ugh.
They're attacking this with a religious fervor on a global basis.
Yeah.
This is no myth. This is the hardback, by the way. This one really hurts.
Yeah.
But collectively, and there's other books like this too that go along with it. Collectively, this is the myth right here. And this is all United Nations Agenda 21 implementation plans. Not too many people are going to read this, I suppose. But it's here. It's available on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it from the United Nations too. But
yeah, but the people who are implementing this nonsense, do they think they will escape themselves from the 1800 society that we are going into in this way?
I invariably get that question, and it's a good question. We historically think about the global elite as simply wanting more money. They want more money.
Yeah. Oh.
But you have to understand, I think, that the value of money is only for the things that you can acquire with it in terms of resources, or the things you can get done with it to cause other people, like you could hire people to do things, to work a field or to build a factory or whatever. If you have lots of money, you can do things like that. You could lose your money very quickly too, but you have money. It ultimately translates into the resources it gives you. Now, when you kind of work that thinking process backwards a little bit, consider a world, put yourself in their shoes, first off, in a Rockefeller or a Rothschild or, I don't know, some big mucky muck. Put yourself in their shoes and just think this way. You could have a lot of money in terms of green dollar bills or euros or whatever. This isn't a good time to probably own euros in the world scene, but it's another issue. Paper currencies are very flighty today. You can be rich one day and pretty poor the next. but if you're a global elite and you have the ability to be a trustee, let's say, on all of the property, all of the land that has been put into global trust for the good of humanity, where you're in control of that land and all the resources therein, all the gold, all the diamonds, all the timber, all the food, everything, that we consider an economic asset today. If it all gets put into economic trust, and there is a limited number of trustees who will dictate basically who has access to these resources and who doesn't, where would you rather be? Would you rather be a billionaire today, and just in terms of dollars or currency, or would you rather be a resource controller over the whole world? These people are thinking the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why land is being gobbled up at breakneck speed all around the world.
Yes.
It's being put into common global trust.
Yep.
For the so-called global good. Now, we have a model of that in the United States with offshore oil and gas drilling. For instance, in the Gulf of Mexico, the government owns the land in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not sure how they got it, but they own it. So let's say British Petroleum wants to drill 10 wells in the Gulf of Mexico. They have to go to the government to buy a lease for the land underwater to drill those wells. They have to lease the land from the government and pay a lot of money to do it, to drill those wells. If the government says no, guess what? They go home. They just, sorry, you're not drilling here. Oh, rats. Maybe we'll find some other country that will give us some space. But our government at this point is acting as trustee for that land. It doesn't really, our Constitution does not provide for our government to own land. Not at all. The people are supposed to own the land here, not the government. But the government now ends up owning all this land. Well, on a global basis, can you picture the same kind of model where the global trust owns all the land? People own nothing. The only rights that people will get to that global trust, if you will, is if they are able to be tolerated by it, or if they can lease some little corner of ground somewhere to exist on. This model is almost identical to the feudal era, which we know as the Dark Ages, where the land barons and the landlords owned everything, and the people, the commoners, went to squat on, like they, not squat, but, I don't know if you know what that, use that term, but where they could just go out and kind of take up residence on a little piece of property somewhere, and the land baron comes along and says, "What are you doing here?" And you say, "Well, I'm just a poor farmer, trying to eke out a living, and I raise hogs or whatever and corn, And so the landlord said, "Well, I like the looks of it. You seem like okay guy. I'll let you stay here if you give me 90% of everything that you make, that you make. And you can keep the other 10% for you and your family." So they lived there basically in squalor, paying everything they got at the pleasure of the landlord, of the land.
Yes, as a servant. Yeah.
So who had the wealth in the Dark Ages? Who really had the wealth? Was it just an issue of currency? No. It was an issue of the land.
Yeah.
It was an issue of the resources on the land, what it could produce for you. If you had a gold mine, if you had a diamond mine, if you had just farming land, you had a forest, whatever it was, your value was in those resources on the land. And historically, this has always been the way it is. You think back to the story of Job in the Old Testament of the Bible, where Job had everything stripped away from him for a time, lost all his family, all his land, lost his cattle, lost his herds, and everything was all gone. And then in the end of it, built them all back up again. There was never one mention of money. He was wealthy because of the herds he had, because of the thousands of camel that he owned, because of the tens of thousands of acres that he ranched on, and the amount of gold that he had and so on. It wasn't just a matter of currency. It was a matter of possessions and the resources. And these people view themselves as the future resource controllers, period. They're going for it all. They want it all. They don't want to buy and sell it. They just want it. Every square inch, if they can get hold of it.
That is very clear. Yes. Yeah. They want it all. And whatever human, how you say that, anything human is lost in this way of thinking and the way of acting what they do. A human being is worth zilch. Like in medicine is the same thing right now.
Yeah.
Because technocracy went into medicine already in 1910. And the way you have to cope with that is inhuman, basically. And these people are basically psychopaths, if you ask me. Because
I know a lot
they
of
lost their own humanness also.
Yeah. In America, our health system today, which we affectionately know as Obamacare, they would like to head us towards a single pay system, I'm sure, and do away with insurance companies altogether. But the health system here, as well as in other countries, is not about healthcare. According to technocracy, it's not about healthcare, it's about the data. It's about the data they collect about the people in the system. And the reason I say that is because technocracy is driven by data. You are an object of that data because you're part of society. You're just a number, if you will. You're just you can kind of imagine a big commercial feedlot for cattle, where they've got the pens and the cattle get moved from this pen to that pen, and they have the scientific mixers where they mix the feed, just the right food for the animals, and they can maximize the weight gain, and you end up in a sausage factory in the end. But they view society much like a feedlot operator views his feedlot. They're out there to be managed. So how do you manage them? You manage them by collecting data. You have to collect data on everything, all the economic data. And your health is economic. Your health is an economic issue. You see, part of the reason it should actually be pretty plain to you and your listeners too, that you only have a certain contribution to society, and you're part of their machine. And the day that the computer algorithm, if you will, decides that you are beyond your usefulness to society, what level of importance do you have to that machine anymore? Not much. You may still exist, you may still survive, but you're not going to get the same kind of service that you got when you were in prime and really doing something for society in their eyes. In their eyes. Old people don't produce anything for them. That's just, they just don't. They got no use for old people. They got no use for sick people either.
That's very clear.
Sick people are they just consume.
Yeah.
How unfair is it, they will say, how unfair it is for such a small minority of people to consume such a large percentage of resources.
Yeah.
That's not fair. You see, social justice issue, it's not fair.
Yeah. And that is why they call us useless eaters.
That's
or
right.
expendable containers.
That's about it. Yeah. That's about it.
Yeah.
So I've got to read to you some of the requirements of technocracy that they wrote down in 1930, because it's still true to this day. It's amazing. You got to hand it to engineers too and scientists for their ability to document things. And by the way, I am not anti-scientist or anti-engineer in any way. We're talking about them as if, kind of collectively they're all bad. That's not true. There are the vast majority of engineers and scientists are perfectly balanced people who are not trying to rule the world, who don't think they're better than all other men, or women. There's plenty of them. So I don't want to give a bad taste to anybody in this program that we're bashing science. I love science personally, but I just don't want science to control me. That's all. I like it that it serves me, but I'm not going to control it because they tell me to control it. But here's what they wrote down in 1934 in the technocracy study course. That was their Bible kind of technocracy. Number one, register on a continuous 24-hour per day basis the total net conversion of energy. That was the first one. They only had 7 requirements. Only 7. I'm just giving you the first 5. The first one was register on a continuous 24-hour per day basis the total net conversion of energy. Number 2, by means of the registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible a balanced load. Can you see smart grid in this?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's what
Yes.
they tell us here. It's all over the literature. Balanced load, balanced load. We have to have a balanced load. All you hear.
Like a mantra.
They don't tell us that they're going to balance it on our back. But
yeah.
They're going to, okay, number 3. Quote, provide a continuous inventory of all production and consumption. Close quote. Number 4. Get the other one up here. Quote, provide a specific registration of the type, kind, etc. of all goods and services, where produced and where used. Number 5, quote, provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. Close quote.
That is why they built in Utah the NSA computer.
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. Well, actually, for them, it is. The NSA is part of a wider network of intelligence in our country, and I'll comment on that too. But you see the collection of data here. The collection of data. They knew that in order to run the mechanism of society, that they had to collect the information that would let them analyze what's going on in the system so they can make their mid-course corrections and make policies, etc. Okay? It's essential to it. This is why we see this everywhere we go. And, just before we get off of the intelligence aspect, I want to point out that in America, there are no less than 16 different intelligence agencies. The NSA is one of the big ones. The CIA is another one. The FBI, of course. Department of Homeland Security. But there's a whole bunch of other ones, smaller ones, that are still just as important. In 2005, all of the intelligence agencies of our nation were wrapped under a single authority called the Director of National Intelligence. He has his own cabinet-level office in Washington, D.C. He's responsible for the budget of every one of those agencies in our country. He's responsible for the structure of all of those organizations in our country. And I'll say our intelligence network was transformed in 2005, for sure, to support technocracy. In other words, to support this data gathering mechanism. And that was exactly when we started to see the NSA go nuts, collecting phone calls and emails and spying on foreign governments and people, citizens of other countries around the world. And the facility in Utah that you mentioned is simply one of many that they have today, by the way. They have several facilities that collectively have as much capacity as the one in Utah. It's huge. It's inconceivable, the capacity for intelligence gathering that this whole organization has. Well, my question was, who structured this new paradigm in America? Because it affects the world too. It's not just here. It affects the entire world.
Yeah.
Who structured this whole thing? Who came in and reformed it, put it all together like the way it is today, where we're being spied on right down to, the last little whisker in your beard, Well, in 2005, when George Bush was president at the time, he created the office. It's on April 21. And it was called the National Intelligence Agency, to be run by the Director of National Intelligence. George Bush appointed that first person to do the reorganization, right? To get everything straightened out. The man he appointed was John Negroponte. Now, you may not recognize the name. That's okay. He's one of ours. I'd give him to you gladly, but you don't want it. John Negroponte is a member of the Trilateral Commission. They're the ones that put this all together. from the get-go. We see their name coming up every time some significant thing happens. A member of the Trilateral Commission is there. And I might add, there's only about 100 from America today, only 100 of these people. And yet they show up everywhere you turn around. They're there. The director of the NSA, the National Security Advisor to the president, really one of the most powerful positions in America, Susan Rice. She was formerly ambassador to the United Nations, the one that talked about Benghazi just being some, stupid YouTube video that whatever started it. Well, Susan Rice is a member of the Trilateral Commission. So was the former NSA. So was the NSA before that. In fact, President Obama has not had one NSA since the day he entered office who has not been a member of the Trilateral Commission. Curious, isn't it?
So he's kept in check rather firmly.
I know. Let me go back. Go back into history a little bit. The United Nations conference that was held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 that produced the Agenda 21 book and Doctrine of Sustainable Development. That conference was made possible by another United Nations effort a few years earlier. In 1987, it was called the Brundtland Commission that was put together to kind of create the ideological base for the Rio conference. And it produced a book called Our Common Future. It's still available it's still published today. You can get it on Amazon. Our Common Future. The head of that committee was Gro Brundtland. Gro Brundtland. You may recognize her name as having been a prime minister at one time of Norway. She was also the economic minister of Norway before that. But she was near and dear to the UN, so they asked her to head up this conference that produced Our Common Future. And it's a good book to read, actually. If you just want a primer on how it all started, that's the one to read, Our Common Future from 1987. And the United Nations later said that Gro Brundtland was the singular architect and the singular driver behind Agenda 21 and the Rio conference. Okay, in other words, they hold her up as being a principal to it. Gro Brundtland was a member of the Trilateral Commission, a European member of the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah.
These people show up everywhere. This was their policy. This was their policy to set up the system of technocracy. It started with people like Gro Brundtland creating Agenda 21. It's completed all the way down the line with people like John Negroponte showing up to completely restructure the intelligence network in the world, and all kinds of people in between. And I could, show you the whole trail of it. We're kind of probably running short on time. People can read the book. they can get Technocracy Rising to read it because, folks, the trail is there, absolutely, positively. Yeah. And it's a fact. It's not just conjecture. It really is there. So two other anecdotal stories on the Trilateral Commission that are pertinent to Europe. In 2011, Greece and Italy almost bit the bullet. Economic chaos. Almost blood running in the streets, certainly gasoline running in the streets of Greece, where cars were being burned and buildings were being torched, and people were just completely beside themselves with unemployment and economic angst and everything else. And it looked like Greece could go up in flames. Italy was not far behind. Italy had huge financial problems, couldn't come to a political agreement. And it's interesting to note that Italy and Greece are the two countries credited historically for the whole Western philosophy, Western culture came out of those two countries, Roman law, Greece, Grecian thinking. And so when they were down for the count, the EU saw fit to send in surrogate prime ministers, not elected, to run their countries. Just take over and run their countries as a dictator. Do you remember who they sent? Now, you remember, this is unelected. I can't imagine the people in Greece or Italy standing to have a dictator come in that's not elected by the people and tell them what to do. I can't imagine that, but they did. They accepted it. These two people were sent in, appointed by the EU, to take over those countries to essentially ensure that their debts got paid. That was really the bottom line. They wanted to make sure they got their money out of it. So they sent Mario Monti to Italy. At least he was an Italian. I guess that's good. But, well, I'm sure he's an Italian, but Mario Monti is a member of the Trilateral Commission. And when they sent him in, your own press called him by name a technocrat. They said, we're going to send, you can go check your press on this. They went in and they said, we're going to send a technocrat, Mario Monti, to take control of Italy to solve Italy's financial economic issues. And then, who did they send into Greece? But a guy by the name of Papademos. He was actually from Greece. He also was a member of the Trilateral Commission. And they also called him a technocrat as well. Our press didn't, but yours did. Now, I lost your audio. I lost your audio there. I can't hear you now.
Yeah, sorry.
Now you're back. Okay.
I have Lucas Papademos as visiting professor of public policy, Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, former Prime Minister of Greece, former Vice President of the European Central Bank, former Governor of the Bank of Greece in Athens. And the other guy, the Monti guy, here he is, member of the Italian Senate, President Bocconi University, Milan, former President of the Council of Ministers, Italy, former member of the European Commission, Competition Policy and Internal Market, honorary President Bruegel, Brussels, honorary European Chairman, Trilateral Commission.
There you go.
So, some characters, huh? Gosh.
You know. I lay this, I've been studying the Trilateral Commission for almost 40 years. I know these people. Not some of them personally, I don't anymore, but I know their mindset, and I know their game at this point, what they're doing.
The new members have to be invited, so that is where you keep the mindset pure, so to speak. That's
right. They are. You don't apply for membership. They ask you to join.
Yeah, on the show.
That's right. So these people, there's really never been more than about 300 members at any one time, and roughly Europe's had about a third. David Rockefeller wrote in his book in 1990, I want to say it was 98, I think it was 1998, that the members of the Trilateral Commission had been instrumental in creating the economic union as we know it today. And he's right. I haven't studied the European Union nearly as much as America, just simply because I'm consumed studying America. But I've studied it enough to know that at every critical juncture where the EU has moved forward from its initial phases, as an economic union, by the way, its initial phases way back when.
Yeah, trade agreement.
That's right. It's all been orchestrated by members of the Trilateral Commission. Were it not from them, were it not for them, put it another way, were it not for their presence, I don't believe you'd have an EU today. I don't think you would. At least certainly not in the form that it is today. It would not have happened. No. And I don't think we would have most of the things that we have in our country today that are plaguing us were it not for these people. And the economic system that they put in place, their new international economic order, on one hand, I could say, if I was thinking in terms of my 1980s knowledge, I would criticize them for creating an economic system that is thoroughly broken. I would say, you idiots don't, you're a bull in a china shop. You thought you were going to do good with the world economy, and you've wrecked it. You've wrecked it beyond repair. And now what on earth are we going to, we have nothing to fall back on. Nothing to fall back on. We're going to start from scratch. But if I was going to judge them from the standpoint of technocracy, I would say they have been a smashing success.
Right on track.
Right on track.
Yeah.
Economists have missed this all along the way. Analysts have missed this all along the way. It's astounding that they've gotten this far to do this without exposure. And one of my main intents of doing this book, Technocracy Rising, is to expose these rascals for who they are, for what they are, and just encourage people, don't worry about the issues half as much as you worry about getting rid of this virus.
Yeah.
Global society.
Yep.
These people have to be removed, or we will never be free from the technocracy incursion on the world. For example, let's say that you blew the cover on chemtrails. Let's say that you blew the cover in such a way that all the politicians in the world rose up and said, we outlaw chemtrails. We outlaw them. There'll never be another plane fly. And you'd go home and celebrate. I don't know how you celebrate, but your friends, whatever, you celebrate. Yay, we did it. We knocked them back into the 17th century. And you could have a good time for a day or two, but I will guarantee you that even if you were to kill a major initiative like that, there's 10 others coming at you from another direction that are worse than that you won't even see coming if you're not looking for them.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Getting rid of the source of these things.
Exactly.
Yes.
The chemtrails are the leaves.
That's right.
Go to the roots of the thing.
That's right. Somehow we got to get to the root and chop the tree down.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, what I did some time ago with the TTIP, that trade agreement that they are trying to push on, there is one Dutch politician who wasn't in favor of it. And so I sent him the title of your book, and I sent him the link to the Caravan of Midnight show. Right. So he can't say I didn't know anymore. And I intend to do this more often because, yes, I totally agree. With your book, you show the pattern and you show the whole, and then people can understand why all these different crazy things are happening. Because like in the court system, people think they follow the rules, but somewhere higher up in the pyramid, the rules have been changed. So you're talking this language, but that is not to be understood anymore in the court like that. So you're barking up the wrong tree, so to speak.
Right. My chapter, by the way, on reflexive law, I think it's chapter 7, perhaps. It'll be a good one for Europeans to read, especially, because the philosophy of reflexive law was actually born in Germany. That's probably not surprising, but it was. And so they were the ones that first started, German legal minds first started to discuss reflexive law at about the mid-1980s. And reflexive law has, it was created, if you will, to be the legal system for sustainable development. It was specifically suited for a legal system of sustainable development. And of course, that means you have to understand something about what sustainable development is to know even what I'm saying. But the traditional rule of law and the historic and traditional rule of law that both Europe and the United States understood very well has been replaced with a system of soft law that is kind of self-recursive in its thinking. It first determines what it wants the outcome to be. And then it collects all these studies and other experts from other fields and areas of stuff of whatever might bear on the issue. And they bring all those studies to court. And then the judge, or even if there's a jury, ends up making a decision for or against the person bringing the suit. And it has nothing to do, it has nothing to do with the traditional concept of rule of law. Are you guilty for breaking a law? Like, for instance, if you murder somebody, you can well expect to be picked up and carted off to jail, maybe for the rest of your life. You break the law, there's a penalty, and the penalty is just, prescribed, and everybody knows what it is. With reflexive law, it's not that way. You don't know what the rules are until they tell you what the rules are, and then they bend you into compliance by applying this system of rules and regulations that have no basis in law. It's just basically what they decide to do at the time. This system of reflexive law is being used all over the planet, including the United States, to enforce and enable sustainable development. It's an important cog to it. They couldn't have done it without reforming the legal system. They could not implement technocracy without transforming the legal system. And they've done that.
Yeah, it's very frightening, yes. So there are two more things that I want to cover, because we have a quarter of an hour still to go on. And that is education.
Yes.
And that is, what do we do? What can we do about this? So first education, and then let's dwell on what we can do as citizens and individuals.
Early technocracy understood the value of education. Some of the stuff they wrote back then was just incredible. And I'm going to read you just a short quote from the technocracy study course, just to give you an idea. It says that a requirement is an education system to train the entire younger generation indiscriminately as regards all considerations other than inherent ability, a continental system of human conditioning, close quote. So they view education as human conditioning, not education. See that?
Yes. Social engineering.
That pretty quickly. Education is supposed to be education.
Yeah.
Conditioning is something that Pavlov did to his dogs, to get them to drool when they heard the bell. So, for food, conditioning is altogether different than education.
Absolutely. So, isn't it a sort of social engineering then, in a sense?
It is totally social engineering what's taking place here. And the conditioning is necessary so that people in this system of technocracy, so that they'll be good little workers, whatever they assign them to do, and secondly, that they will always have the right response to a given situation. They don't care what you think; they want you to have the right response. And so, we see all around the world today, education has been transformed into a system of human conditioning. It's outcome-based education. That's kind of one of the names it's used.
Yes.
It's not education at all. It's human conditioning to simply get people to do repetitive tasks, to make them compliant little global citizens with values that support technocracy. And it has nothing to do with inherent ability. They say that right in the statement. Has nothing to do with inherent ability, like
No.
talents. It's small little detail like talent and brain power.
Yeah.
They don't want any more PhDs necessarily, or put it another way, is there's not going to be too many PhDs that actually break through the glass ceiling to get into where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the education system is keeping people dumbed down.
Yes, absolutely. You can see that today already, big time.
In America, especially.
Yeah, but here too. I see it here too, exactly. But it's in the direction of robotization and transhumanism.
Yeah.
Mr. Kurzweil with his idiotic ideas.
Yeah. Transhumanism and technocracy are like Siamese twins.
Yes. Yeah.
They're very symbiotic. They're both based on the same underlying philosophy of scientism. I don't know if we've talked too much about scientism yet, but
no, please do. Yeah.
Well, scientism is very much a religion, in my estimation, and it basically postulates that the only source of truth in the universe about man and nature can be discovered through science. So science is the ultimate touchstone for truth. And if you don't agree with science, you're a denier or something. But the problem with scientism, it's easy to debunk it. By the way, it's interesting that one of the world's most well-known religious philosophers, C.S. Lewis, wrote extensively about scientism. He had it nailed way back in the 50s. He really did. It's a religion, in essence. And the God is science. The God itself becomes science. The priesthood becomes the scientists and engineers who are able to approach the oracle of science to discover what it said. And then to come down the mountain, so to speak, and relay that message to the people. That's the people, so that the people can obey what the science, what the priest says. The problem with it is, of course, that nobody knows for sure what science really said to the scientists. Because it's up to him. It's just up to him. So, it kind of sparks, it kind of brings up this picture in my mind of, I've seen, the cartoons of I don't know if it was the Mayan people or whatever, but whoever it was that worshiped the volcano. And the priest or whatever it was, the witch doctor, would go up the mountain and consult with the volcano. So the gods of the volcano would be kind to the people down in the village and not blow fire and stuff all over them. And so the volcano would whisper a message to this priest, and the priest would come down and say, well, the gods of the volcano says that next month on the 13th or whatever, you need to offer a virgin to the volcano. And so go vote amongst yourselves now and go find a young, 15-year-old virgin, and we'll dress her all up and put her on a stretcher, and we'll take her up the volcano and we'll throw her into the volcano, and we will appease the gods of the volcano. What a scam. I mean, it's like volcanoes are alive. And, no, it's just ridiculous. But people believe that because that's all they had to believe. That was their system of belief. People that are into scientism, like the Al Gores of the world, by the way, they have a belief system where they're telling us that science said a certain thing to them. And that we're fools for not believing them, that they're reporting the truth with these, what science said to them. Yet they have no proof. They offer no proof. Their evidence has been continually shattered by other scholars, and yet they insist that we should believe them instead of anybody else we'd ever listen to. And if we don't, we will be punished. You see, that's the same thing that the priest would say to the people at the volcano. If they were to dare say, we're not giving you no 15-year-old virgin. Are you nuts? You know, we don't believe you. We don't believe the volcano said that. You know what that priest was going to say? If you don't do what I say, you are going to be punished by the god of the volcano. That's what he says.
Yeah.
The volcano is going to erupt and you're going to all be destroyed or whatever. It's the same scam that's being used today. You can see it everywhere. Believe like they do or prepare to be punished.
Yeah, see the vaccination propaganda, same thing.
It is. It's exactly right. And we're being pressed in America here all over the place to have mandatory, to take away all the exemptions for vaccination. California just passed a law this week, just a radical law that will wipe out all of the other reasons that people can avoid vaccination for the young children.
Well,
so
they
will get those 32 shots before they leave the hospital, whether the parents want it or not, and they're going to take their baby home and just pray to the God of heaven that the baby survives it. Yes. What a shame! It's just criminal, but it's a scam. It really is a scam, and they have their God of science has told them that vaccinations are good for everybody.
Yes, I've spoken to people in Holland who are in charge of vaccinations. Oh God, it's really religion. It's crazy. It's totally nuts.
It is.
They're working on it also here in the Netherlands to make it impossible to refuse vaccination. I mean, if only because of societal pressure. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to be vaccinated, you are wrong.
I know. I grew up in a time where when somebody had measles, that all the parents in the area would bring the kids over and have measles party.
Exactly, that's the way to go.
And they'd expose them. Let's get it over with. They'd expose them all to measles. No one ever died, ever. I don't remember anybody dying.
No.
And you know what? We got a vaccination with the real deal that I will never get measles again in my life.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And when you're a woman, you will be protected against ovarian cancer when you have had measles, for instance. So that is it. Okay. Now I want to go to what can we do to get rid of these psychopaths? Because that's where do we start? What can we do?
I know. Education really is. I mean, people have to know. They have to know who's really behind us. And in America, I tell people that it's really too late to do anything for our Congress, our senators, our congressmen, because they're already irrelevant. So spend your time working on a local basis to drive sustainable development and Agenda 21 policies out of your local community. And it's trickled down in America here. I suppose it has in Europe too. It's trickled down in America here to every little burg, you name it, every small community, it's everywhere. And people have bought into this philosophy. Now, I will still contend that many of the people that have bought into sustainable development, for instance, never heard of Agenda 21 by name. They've never heard of some of these other, organizations that are pushing it by name. And there are probably a number of them that are still what I would call good Americans. They just got duped. And when they see the truth, they will reject the error. And I think it's possible in many communities in America that we can drive this stinking philosophy out of our local hamlets and our towns and villages and counties and even our states. There's already been one state that's outlawed Agenda 21 completely. Got many more to go, but it's a start. And, I'm not sure what to tell a European audience exactly. What they can do, but I do know that the exposure to the truth is absolutely essential if anything's going to happen.
Yep.
And it just might be the local aspect might still be the appropriate response, even though you don't have control over the people over you, which you don't. You do have some modicum of control over your local town, a village, a town, a township, or whatever you would have in a city, and you can work there. You can go and challenge people to understand the truth, to reject the error, and say, we don't want this. We don't want to go this way to scientific dictatorship. It's not in our best interest. It's not in your best interest, whoever you're talking to. And just challenge them to change. And if they won't change, then tell them if there's anything you can do in your power to get them removed or replaced, you're going to do it.
Yeah. And it has to be from the bottom up, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so at this point. They've driven it from the top down upon us. I see the only way of doing it is just go back up the chain the same way it came down.
Yeah.
And it will send a message. It has already in America in many places. When you clean up a local community, you're sending a message up the channel. You're not getting away with it. You know, we're on to you. We know what you're doing. And we categorically reject it. And we're going to drive you out next. Yeah. And so, you know, they'll still bluster and say, well, you know, that's just one instance, or, oh, it's those rednecks out there, you know, they're doing this and that. But, you know, no, you can bluster and you can lie all you want, but we're coming for you. And I'm kind of to the point, you know, if I was 40 years old, I might have a slightly different attitude than what I have right now. Possibly, maybe not. I was pretty rebellious even when I was 40 years old. But
rebellious. Yeah.
You know, there was a Texas Democrat one time that had a campaign for attorney general. He's going after some of the big oil companies, and he posted this sign outside of Exxon's main entrance in Texas. A big finger pointing right at Exxon. It's kind of like the, you know, Uncle Sam wants you poster in World War II. And so Uncle Sam, or he's Uncle Sam, and he's pointing a finger at Exxon like, we want you. And his campaign motto to these people was, I will fight you till hell freezes over, and then I'll fight you on the ice. And as just kind of a metaphor, that's a really concise depiction of the zeal and dedication that people like yourself need to have and communicate to those you are disagreeing with. Because it's not an option anymore.
No.
All the cards are on the table. They're almost to the point where they can say they won. And we don't have time to play around anymore. And my message to people, you know, who are in this movement, you may do something to me along the way. I realize that, or I may just die. You know, I could at any time. We get hit by a truck, we're gone. But as long as I have breath, I will fight you till hell freezes over, and then I'll fight you on ice. So don't think you're going to scare me off. You know, don't think you're going to just make me go away with your platitudes and your, you know, all you do, you know, your criticism. You just wear a tinfoil hat. That's all. Now look me in the eye, Mr. So-and-so or whatever. Get this message if you get nothing else. You think I'm going to go away today, but I'm not going away. I'll be your worst dream, you know, for the future until one or both of us are gone. So, you know, that kind of zeal and dedication is something they are not used to seeing. They're used to people kowtowing to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
People falling over in fear because they're so powerful, you know, money or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's enough honest, I would call them patriots. That's maybe not the right word to use to a European, but there are people who understand the value of liberty and freedom.
Yep. Yeah.
That they're not going to go to the grave without defending it.
Yeah.
And fighting for it.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid this time, historically, if we lose freedom and liberty, it will take hundreds of years to get it back. Just like it did to recover from the Dark Ages.
Yes.
It was not an easy recovery from the Dark Ages.
No, not at all.
Hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
We better stop it right now, right here. And Patrick, I want to thank you so much for everything you told us to help us understand where we are at right now. And it's rather dim, but with the help of your book, we can enlighten many people. And I intend to do that. And if you want to come back to stress some points that we haven't discussed today, you're very welcome to do so. And okay, thank you very much for tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. It's been very nice.
It was my pleasure.
Likewise. Hope we get to meet you someday.
Yes, that would be nice. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, listeners, bye-bye. This was the Minority of One report. Bye-bye.